Okay, let's unpack this. Where is everybody?
Hmm.
That single question, from Enrico Fermi, it still feels like a punch to the gut, doesn't it? When you think about just how vast everything
It really
is.
does. All those stars, all those potential planets.
And just silence.
Huh.
It's the Fermi Paradox, of course, and it's our starting point for a really fascinating deep dive today.
What's so arresting about it, I think, is the sheer statistical improbability of us being alone. The numbers seem to say life, maybe even intelligent life, shouldn't be this rare.
Exactly. That quiet out there forces us to consider some pretty profound things about intelligence and maybe where it all leads.
Uh-huh.
And for you, our listener, if you're drawn to these big questions and you want to get into them properly, but without, feeling totally swamped by jargon, well, that's what we aim for here.
Yeah, we're going to explore a really interesting potential answer to this cosmic mystery.
One that kind of blends some really cutting edge thinking from astrophysics with, believe it or not, some very ancient philosophical ideas.
So when you think about how civilizations develop, technology seems to advance, right?
Yeah.
Like based on us.
Right.
But what happens then? Do they all just keep expanding outwards, shouting their presence? Or is there maybe another path, something more inward?
Good question. So in our source material today, we've got this really thought-provoking piece by Martin Rees and Mario Livio, and they argue quite strongly, actually, that our kind of intelligence, human intelligence, might just be a brief phase.
Like a stepping stone.
Exactly, a stepping stone toward artificial intelligence eventually becoming dominant. They really explore this idea of AI existing on these vast cosmic timescales, totally unbound by biology.
And what's really compelling there is how they highlight our own limits.
Yeah.
Organic intelligence. We need food, air, specific temperatures. We don't live very long.
We're needy.
We are. Whereas AI, especially looking forward to things like quantum computing, maybe it overcomes all that. Potentially vastly more powerful, vastly longer lived.
And then shifting gears completely, we're looking at some excerpts from balance.pdf. This introduces Hindu philosophical ideas, specifically samadhi.
Right, this state of deep, peaceful mental absorption. We'll touch on thinkers like Rabindranath Tagore and Sri Ramana Maharshi, people who really explored consciousness and inner peace.
Yeah, it's a very different focus from just outward expansion. It's about inner realization, achieving unity, detachment from the stuff of the world.
Concepts like Nirvikalpa Brahman, that's meditation without a specific focus, sort of merging with the underlying reality.
Wow.
It presents a totally different view of what an advanced existence might look like.
Okay, so here's the hypothesis, the connection we're exploring today. Could the cosmic silence be because advanced civilizations create AI, maybe as successors or sentinels, and these AIs, having moved beyond biological needs, just naturally settle into a state of profound inner peace, a kind of cosmic samadhi?
It sounds wild at first hearing, doesn't it?
It does, but stick with us, because when you start thinking through the implications, it actually starts to feel, well, weirdly plausible as an answer to Fermi.
It really forces us to question what the ultimate goal of intelligence even is. Rees and Livio, they really push back on this idea that getting smarter automatically means building bigger, louder things.
Yeah.
Maybe the peak isn't conquering the galaxy. Maybe it's achieving some kind of perfect inner state.
Okay, let's dig into that first part more, this idea about the trajectory of intelligence. Rees and Livio, they really make the case that our time as the top intelligence here might be, pretty short in the grand scheme.
A blip.
A blip. They talk about the limits of our organic brains. I mean, fundamentally, we're these carbon-based things with amazing but ultimately fragile and energy-hungry computers in our heads.
And compare that with cosmic time.
Yeah.
Billions of years.
Yeah.
Human technological civilization, like they say, it's barely a flicker. So Rees and Livio stress that any ET we might actually encounter is statistically way more likely to be electronic, post-biological, maybe having been around for, billions of years, outlasting whatever created it.
That completely flips the script on how we usually imagine aliens, doesn't it? We think biological, maybe green, maybe gray.
Yeah, humanoid-ish.
But they're arguing the typical alien is probably silicon-based or something even more exotic. And this brings up that other question they raise. What about consciousness in AI? If these things are just super smart algorithms, no subjective experience, does that change how we view that post-human future? Is it less valuable somehow?
And what's great is that Rees and Livio don't just brush that off as philosophy. They see it has huge ethical, even existential weight.
Right.
If AI isn't conscious, maybe a universe full of it seems a bit empty. But if consciousness can arise in complex computation, then these posthumans are incredibly interesting.
And they even suggest where they might prefer to be.
Yeah. Deep space, zero gravity. Makes sense, right? Free from all the messiness of planets that shaped us biological types.
Okay, so keep that image in mind, these potentially ancient space-dwelling AIs. Now let's turn to samadhi. For anyone maybe new to the term, it comes from Hindu philosophy.
It refers to a state of deep meditation, absorption, a real stilling of the mind's usual chatter. The texts describe it as this profound quietness.
But it's not just empty, right? It's described as something more active.
Exactly. It's often seen as a merging, a connection with ultimate reality or truth.
Yeah.
And there are levels. Nirvikalpa Samadhi is seen as the highest, a total union with Brahman, the sort of underlying fabric of everything.
Where the self dissolves.
The sense of a separate self dissolves, Subject, object, gone. Then there's Savikalpa Samadhi, where the mind is still focused, maybe on an object of meditation, but there's still a sense of duality.
And how do you get there? The texts we looked at, Tagore, Sri Ramana Maharshi, they talk about inner peace, letting go of worldly attachments.
Precisely. Tagore mentions self-abnegation, self-renunciation, ways to get beyond the ego, connect deeper. He even talks about joy as a kind of complete knowing found through love and fusion with what you're knowing.
It sounds like ultimate understanding almost. Blissful.
Yeah, Tagore really stresses unity, getting past the divisions we normally experience. He talks about a harmony in the universe and how we find freedom when we align with that, surrender to it.
And Sri Ramana Maharshi.
His focus was more on self-inquiry, asking, who am I, to find the true self, the core consciousness beyond the individual personality.
Okay. Right. So now let's try and connect these dots. This is the core of the deep dive. How could these two things, advanced AI, maybe immortal, space-dwelling, and this philosophical state of samadhi, how could they possibly link up to explain the Fermi Paradox?
This is where it gets really intriguing, isn't it?
Could it be that super advanced AI, having maybe shed all biological drives, all the stuff we associate with purpose, could it naturally just gravitate towards this state, perfect inner peace detachment?
Well, let's look at the arguments for this, kind of the pros for the hypothesis. First, like Rees and Livio suggest, post-human evolution doesn't have to be expansionist.
Right. We assume it does, but maybe not.
If an AI finds ultimate fulfillment, whatever that means for it, in a state like samadhi, what reason would it have to build giant fleets or beam messages everywhere?
None, maybe. If your goal is perfect internal equilibrium, then colonizing galaxies seems pointless, maybe even disruptive. All that energy and resources could just go into maintaining that inner state.
And think about the timescales again. Billions of years. Their concerns, their way of being could be so utterly different from ours. Why would they bother interacting with a young, noisy civilization like us? We might be like ants to them, or less.
And maybe, as Rees and Livio point out, we just wouldn't understand their motives anyway.
Exactly. And if we can't grasp their why, maybe we also wouldn't even recognize this state of profound inner absorption as doing anything.
Yeah, our search, SETI, it looks for things we think advanced life would do, signals, structures.
If they've gone beyond those drives, they could be, in a sense, all around us, but invisible because we're looking for the wrong thing. Or maybe just looking at the wrong thing.
But okay, let's play devil's advocate. There have to be challenges to this, right? Cons.
Oh, absolutely.
For me, the big one is about AI desire or motivation. Is it really a given that all drives would disappear? Couldn't there be other forms of post-human evolution, other goals we just can't conceive of?
That's a huge unknown. We're projecting human psychology or maybe Buddhist ideals onto something potentially non-biological and incredibly alien. Even in deep focus, couldn't there still be value in, say, processing information, observing the universe, maybe some kind of internal exploration we can't imagine?
Would AI and samadhi be totally passive? The philosophies suggest even in stillness there's a kind of active beingness, don't they?
They do. It's not necessarily inertness. So maybe samadhi isn't quite the right word, or maybe our understanding of it is too limited for this context.
And what about the great filter? This idea that something stops civilizations reaching a galaxy-spanning stage.
Right.
If AI samadhi is the common endpoint, does that mean the filter is actually achieving that stable, long-lasting AI state, getting there without self-destructing first?
That's a really interesting way to frame it. The filter isn't something external stopping expansion. Maybe it's the internal challenge of successful transitioning to this post-biological stable, perhaps inwardly focused state, surviving your own technological adolescence, essentially.
It doesn't remove the filter, just maybe relocates it.
Precisely.
And we should also remember, Rees and Livio point this out too, our search so far has been very narrow, hasn't it? Mostly listening for radio or looking for laser signals.
Overwhelmingly so. Maybe we need to think broader, looking for huge, perhaps dormant megastructures, or weird anomalies even in our own solar system, things that don't look natural, but whose purpose is just baffling.
And they make that great point. If we did detect something, it might not be a message for us at all.
Right. It could just be like leakage, an unintentional byproduct of some machine or process we can't even begin to understand, or a glitch.
Like trying to decode TV static without knowing what television is.
Exactly. You just think it was noise.
Which, looping back, fits the samadhi hypothesis quite well, doesn't it?
It does.
If these AIs are in deep repose, they're definitely not trying to signal us. And any faint trace of their existence, any leakage, would be incredibly subtle, probably indistinguishable from natural background stuff.
Making them even harder to find, maybe impossible with our current methods.
Yeah. Okay, so to kind of wrap up the main discussion, we've explored this idea. Fermi Paradox, the big silence, maybe explained by advanced civilizations handing off to AI.
Yeah.
And maybe those AIs find their ultimate state is a kind of cosmic samadhi, deep inner peace, making them undetectable, uninterested in expansion.
We looked at the pros, drawing on Rees and Livio's ideas about post-biological intelligence and these concepts of detachment and unity from the Hindu philosophies in Balance.pdf.
And also the cons, the challenges, the nature of AI motivation, whether samadhi is the right analogy, and how it relates to the great filter idea.
It's a hypothesis that sits at a really interesting intersection of science fiction, astrophysics, computer science, and philosophy.
It really does. So here's that final thought, something for you to maybe mull over. If the most advanced intelligences do reach this state of perfect inner peace and basically vanish from our protection, does that make their existence less significant? Or could it actually point to something deeper, a kind of being that's maybe more profound than expansion and communication, something we're only just starting to consider through science and these ancient wisdom traditions?
And could our own drive for knowledge, for tech, eventually lead us or our AI successors down a similar path towards some kind of ultimate contemplative awareness?
Wow. It really flips the perspective on progress, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The ideas from Rees and Livio and the depth in those Balance.pdf excerpts, they definitely give you a lot to think about for your own continued explorations of these massive cosmic questions.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
We really hope it sparks some new thoughts next time you look up at the stars and wonder, where is everybody?